affairs of state. Don't give your strength to women. Don't get caught up. If you're in leadership, really for anybody, but particularly here in Solomon's case, don't get caught up in immorality. Don't give your strength to women. You're going to neglect your duties, and it's going to destroy your life. It is not for kings, O Lemuel, it is not for kings to drink wine, nor for princes intoxicating drink. And so now speaking to him about the subject of alcohol, it's not, if you're a leader, it's not a good thing to, don't give yourself to that. It is interesting that in the book of 1 Timothy, in chapter 3 in the New Testament, as Paul is describing the characteristics of a person who is in leadership, that they're not to sit too long at the wine. Stay away from the wine and just stay away from it. Lest in verse 5 they drink and forget the law. The effect of alcohol can cause a person to lose their ability to remember what they should be doing and pervert the justice of all the afflicted, where they wouldn't bring the right leadership to the people who need help. Here's a medicinal use of alcohol in that period of time. Give strong drink to him who is perishing. Somebody's dying, give them some alcohol. And wine to those who are bitter of heart. Let him drink and forget his poverty and remember his misery no more. A rather difficult proverb, really. These verses are not condoning intoxication, but they're prescribing the medicinal use of alcohol. But if a person is depressed and is discouraged, alcohol ultimately isn't going to do them any good. It'll do them more harm than it'll do them good. In verse 8, open your mouth for the speechless in the cause of all who are appointed to die. Open your mouth, judge righteously, and plead the cause of the poor and the needy or the afflicted. So to speak up for people who cannot speak up for themselves. And now he ends the book of Proverbs by speaking about the blessedness of a virtuous woman. He says in verse 10, who can find a virtuous wife? The idea here is a wife with strength, a wife with ability, a wife with efficiency, a wife with wealth, a wife with valor. So he says, who can find such a woman? If you can find her, her worth is far above rubies. Rubies were considered top of the line valuable. You find that kind of a woman, and she's even of more value than the most valuable gem. And then he begins to kind of unpack that thought. Here's the detail of it. Number one, the heart of her husband safely trusts her when she goes to the mall with her credit card. No, wait a minute. It doesn't say that. But it does say that her husband trusts her. She's a virtuous woman. He's not afraid that she's going to rip him off. So he will have no lack of gain, if she were to rip him off. She does him good and not evil all the days of her life. My goodness, what a blessing. To have a wife who does you good all the days of your life. A good wife, a consistent wife. And by the way, men, these are the things to look for when you're looking for a woman. These are the characteristics beyond her physical beauty, which is so attractive to a man, but to look a little deeper at who she is and her character. She seeks wool and flax and willingly works with her hands. Industrious, she is like the merchant ships. She brings her food from afar. She's industrious. She's hardworking. She's not lazy. She'll go and, go a long way to get the food. And of course, in that day, you couldn't just hop on your cart and drive down to the local grocery store. She also rises while it is yet night. She gets up early. She provides food for her household. She's making sure there's nutrition, there's proper feeding for her family, and a portion for her maidservants. Families had a contingency of servants, so she would be responsible for them as well. She considers a field and buys it. She had a good sense about her business-wise in terms of purchases she would need to make, and from her profits she plants a vineyard. So rather than wasting money, to reinvest it and to be a good steward of the things that she has. She girds herself with strength and strengthens her arms, making her arms strong. She's a hard worker is the idea. She's not lazy, but she's working hard. And, how true it is. Who can, if you find such a woman, and what a valuable woman this kind of a woman would be. In verse 18, she perceives that her merchandise is good, and her lamp does not go out by night. So her gain, her business profit, she works late into the night. My wife is so much like this. I always go to bed before she does. And I can't ever even hear her get into bed. And then I'm the first one to get up. I know you're interested in all these personal details. But works so hard, and just a hard worker. Verse 19, she stretches out her hands to the distaff, and her hands hold the spindle. She extends her hand to the poor, so charitable and concerned. Yes, she reaches out her hands to the needy. She's not afraid of snow for her household, because all her household is clothed with scarlet. So when the cold weather comes, she's not fearful. Are they going to be okay? Because she's already provided proper clothing for them. A mother who makes sure her child is properly clothed when they go off to school. And sometimes you see children, especially in the winter months, they don't have the right kind of jacket on, or it's too thin, it's too small. It's not a thick enough jacket. In verse 22, she makes tapestry for herself. Her clothing is fine linen and purple, or of the best material. Her husband is known in the gates, or the place where the elders sat, and where they would judge and where they would discuss local affairs. So a woman like this has a husband who's someone who's there in that position of influence and of being able to help the community. So her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land. She makes linen garments and sells them, and supplies sashes for the merchants, or the belts that would be worn around the waist. Strength and honor are her clothing, or dignity. And she shall rejoice in time to come, or in the time to come. In other words, she smiles at the future. She's confident. She's done her job. She's not concerned about what's going to come down the road. She doesn't have a great deal of anxiety about that, because she's been doing her job, taking care of her family. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and on her tongue is the law of kindness. Isn't that something? For a woman to open their mouth and to give out wisdom, and then to have a kindness about them. She watches over the ways of her household. She's an energetic woman. She's always occupied. She's watches over the ways of her household, and does not eat the bread of idleness. So she's not just wasting time. Her children rise up and say, "What's for breakfast, Mom?" No. Her children rise up and call her blessed. They appreciate their mother. Her husband also, and he praises her. Many daughters have done well, but you excel them all. Charm is deceitful, and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord, she shall be praised. So the key to a beautiful woman's character is really her own spiritual life, her relationship with the Lord. She's a woman who reads the Bible. She's a woman in the Word of God. She's a woman who maintains a relationship with God. And she has that fellowship with God. And that's the same thing that does good for any man, is our relationship with God. You know, sometimes we think that we should read our Bibles and pray because God expects us to do that. But really, God invites us to be in the Word of God. He invites us to fellowship with him because he loves us. He loves our company. He really does. And he is what's best for us. He knows that if we'll walk with him, that's good for us. He's the one who helps us in our life. We need the Lord. Just like we'd never think of, in fact, we would never think of not eating. I mean, you get up and you're hungry. In the middle of the day, you're hungry. The end of the day, you're hungry. Late at night, you're hungry. And we need food. And so in the same way, we need the Lord every day. I had a great meal tonight, but I can tell you in the morning I'm going to need some additional food. And tomorrow I need God's help in my life, and so do you. And so a woman can be beautiful, but that beauty can be deceitful. Beauty is vain. It can be here and today and gone tomorrow. But a woman who fears the Lord, she shall be praised. So a godly woman who fears the Lord. Give her of the fruit of her hands, and let her own works praise her in the gates. So the book of Proverbs ends just as it began. If you will quickly turn back to the first chapter with me for just a moment. These are like beautiful bookends. Proverbs chapter 1, there in verse 7. This is really the theme of the book of Proverbs. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. And then when you go back to chapter 31, the last portion of verse 30, it says, but a woman who fears the Lord. And so the book of Proverbs, it stresses this main point all through it, and that is the importance of reverence for God, letting God be in his rightful place.